Okay, Harvey, great to chat with you. And I put you up with this distinguished group because you are distinguished. Jewel Charney, who I think I told you, probably you are one of the few broadcast meteorologists that could say, I think Jewel Charney may have watched me when I was
Maybe.
broadcasting on air. And
Yeah.
there he is with a number of a famous picture of the first numerical weather forecast or first numerical model back in the early 50s. What
Yeah.
have you found and learned about, quote, the models in your tenure in broadcasting?
Well, there's no question they've come a long way. Let's face it. So much better on the initial conditions. Computer processing power is so much quicker, so models will run more frequently. I mean, and then we have to thank really all the PhDs in our field because they're the ones who really have done all the modeling. And, I would say if you go back to the early days of our era forecasting on television, we had to make great, massive leaps at times from what we were literally seeing out of the models. And now that's, of course, a much, much smaller leap that we sometimes take. So I think that's the single biggest change that I've noticed.
Have the models have, quote, the models helped you, you think, in establishing and then really in enlarging this trust the great trust that you have for people in the Boston and New England area?
Yeah, I think so because I think it's allowed me to have more confidence in a higher percentage of the forecasts I'm issuing. When I mentioned years ago that we had to make leaps of faith, that might mean a great big score, like for me, the blizzard of 1978 up in this area. But it also meant occasional big busts. And now that range is much smaller. But even though it's a tremendous, massive help, and it helps with the confidence, your experience and your communicative skills are still the core, along with the improved models, in what can lead to a lot of trust from the viewers.
So that I hear that's your message to beginning broadcasters or mid-career broadcasters is it's more than just standing up in front and saying, here's what the models say.
Yes, no question about it. And of course, the more forecasting experience you get, the more you can draw upon up here. And oh, I remember a similar situation, and maybe it didn't work out the way I thought, but I remembered why. It's almost like building a mental encyclopedia. So as you use and your experience on the air and you develop more poise and your communicative skills improve, all of that comes into play. And then you add the improvement, big improvement in our
Oh, you're breaking up, Harvey.
models.
Okay,
And
sorry, you're breaking up. Can you just repeat that? The last thing?
Of course I can, as long as you repeat the question.
What was the question? Oh, about, for the younger people and mid-career people starting out now in the world of these super accurate models. What's your advice?
Yeah, I mean, again, of course, you are way ahead of where we were because your guidance is much, much better than what we had. But remember, you're also building up your experience base in forecasting. Pattern recognition is still extremely important. And as a meteorologist and a forecaster, you're able to do that more and more as you gain experience. And also, you're gaining experience in your communicative skills. And that is going to aid you as you go along. So if you combine that with the improvement in the computer modeling, you're going to have success going forward more and more, I believe.
Harvey, talk about the world of the icons that we're in now versus years ago, even before the internet, and what you see sort of a bit of a risk in communicating trust, and also what do you see in the years ahead?
Well, I think that what we have to realize is that if we go back several decades and there was a winter storm threat in a given area, and viewers are shopping around for different forecasts, they're going to get a lot of different forecasts. Now, the range and forecasts they get are not going to be as great because, again, the computer modeling, which is our guidance, is so superior to what it was decades ago. But who you are as a person, how you come across, your credibility, your communicative skills, your likability, they all come into play, perhaps even more now than they did decades ago, because the difference in the actual forecast isn't that large. But the presentation difference can still be significant. You may have the right forecast. If you didn't communicate it well, the viewer didn't receive it as the correct forecast. So you have to work on all of those things. And as you build experience, you will get better and better in it. And if you're genuinely a likable, good person, that will come through as well. There's an old expression, the camera doesn't lie. And I do believe that.
And Harvey, we believe you and we trust you. I know for all the years that I was in New England, and congratulations on your service to the science and to the people up there. And all the best. And what's the one last piece of advice, one little bite, let's say, that a young person coming to you and looking at their years ahead, what would be that piece of advice, that one nugget, if you will?
I have a couple of pieces of advice, if I'm allowed, but one piece of advice would be, don't let one bad forecast really get you down too badly. The way I've handled those in the past, and hopefully they don't happen as often now. Think about a closer in baseball, comes in the bottom of the ninth. The team is ahead 3-2, bases loaded, nobody out, strikes out the side, a hero. Next day, comes into the bottom of the ninth. Team's ahead 3-2, 2 outs, man on first, just has to get one out, gives up a 2-run homer, a bum. All right. So you always have to remember that in forecasting, like in sports, you always have another game coming. You have the next forecast, you have the next day, and hopefully many more over days, weeks, months, and years. And it's track record over time that's so important. And don't ever let one forecast that didn't work out well affect how you forecast going future. In the future, you cannot forecast being scared because of a recent bust.
Harvey, thanks so much. I remember also the one that I would hate was a Friday. If I busted a forecast on a Friday, then you had to wait for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to try to make up for it, or some terrible call up on air. And I said, oh no, why did this happen on a Friday? Why couldn't it have happened on a Monday?
I know. And Bob, in our era, when we were kind of, decades ago doing this, if we worked the evening shift, there was a 6 o'clock news and an 11 o'clock news.
Yeah.
Now, as I finish up my on-air career, 8 newscasts in my shift. Good. So you get many more shots at it, makes it a little more challenging to make each one so unique and so different. There's going to have to be some repetition, but also you build a better rhythm that way. So, for everything that's a challenge, there's a reward if you look at it the right way.
That's one thing I think it is different. How do you adjust that workload with doing so many presentations now, with actually being able to look at and think about the forecast?
Well, that's especially challenging, especially if you're in a breaking situation, severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, blizzard, something like that. It's quite a challenge. I mean, fortunately, the weather graphic systems that we have now, a lot of what we do can be automated to a certain extent, which is a great time saver. And you just have to realize that if you're in one of those situations, you're in nowcasting, and you just nowcast your way through the whole shift. Now, if you're not in a nowcasting situation, you always want to have ways to make each presentation different than the one that preceded it. And, maybe it's something like, hey, guess what? We just checked out and we're like 6 inches below average in precipitation this year. This could foresee some drought potential. I mean, just throwing that at the beginning of one of the presentations makes it different. And you're saying something that could be memorable and important to the viewer. So there's certain things you have to keep doing, like that 7-day forecast has to be in every full weathercast, because any viewer, that could be the only one they're looking at. So you can't cheat them. But yet at the same time, you want to throw some things in that can make each one somewhat unique from each other.
Thanks so much, Harvey. And it'd be fun to wonder if Jewel Charney was still with us, what he would think of everything that's now. He said, I did this with models. I started out with just a few equations.
Yeah.
Happy to be here with Dave Atlas in my background, who was one of the giants of really modern radar meteorology, and also one of the, I hope he doesn't mind me calling you a giant in radar meteorology today, James Spann. And when you come on with radar, people pay attention. You are trusted. Where did that trust originate? How did you get there with having so many people trust you?
I really think before you can focus on the radar aspect of it, Bob, you have to focus on the people side of it. You have to have a relationship with people to gain trust, and that takes time. And I have been here for a long time, and I really work hard to get to know the people that I serve. You have to understand the people, the culture, and the geography and the microclimate of the places that you serve, and that takes time. I'm in a school every day. I do 1 to 2 school programs every single day and work with kids. And by golly, I teach those kids radar, because now with everybody having a good radar app on their phone, those kids can identify features that might help them save their life or the life of somebody in their family. So I love to teach radar with kids, but it's all about spending time with the people that you serve. And once they understand that you have their best interests in your heart, then you will gain that trust. But at the same time, they have to understand that you do know how that radar works.
So you're always, it's interesting. One of the big programs, of course, as you know, is Weather Ready Nation. And you mentioned the young people and the children knowing as much. Will they be the person who's trusted in their family?
Yeah, I will tell you, Bob, and of course, we're in a very tornado-prone part of the United States. And many times an 8, 9, 10-year-old child will step up and be the leader in their family. And number one, insisting that the family have a NOAA weather radio so they can get the warning. Number 2, having a plan, knowing where they're going. Number 3, having a helmet for everybody if there's a tornado warning and they're in the polygon. Understanding where they are on a map. So many people have a problem with geography illiteracy now. They can't even read a map because of phones and turn-by-turn directions. So I really do think that children will lead the way in so many instances. And again, Bob, I do teach them how to spot a hook echo. What is a debris ball? What is a velocity couplet? What is a TDS, a tornado debris signature? Kids are interested.
Visiting the schools is still important for you for trust.
Absolutely. And again, I do at least 1 to 2 schools every single day and try and produce online videos for the schools where I can't visit. I can't visit every single school, but that is an important part of the trust element. But again, the other part is people need to know that you understand radar technology and what the radar can do and what it cannot do. And I think we have to be honest, Bob. Radar is not a panacea. It's a miraculous tool. Goodness, we got an Enterprise digital receiver in 1979, color weather radar. We went from this old rat's fax machine, this printout, to something that was usable. And I've gone from that to where we are now with these amazing displays from that Bob Barron developed and some of the other vendors and the technology. But at the same time, Bob, radar cannot do certain things. In many cases, that radar beam might be 5, 6, 7, 8,000 feet off the ground. And so what we're looking at is not at the surface, it's 5,000 feet or higher up. And we have to tell
your
people
equipment.
that.
Know your
right.
equipment.
Absolutely. And at the same time, not every time you see green and red together, that doesn't mean there's a tornado there. Sometimes we just don't know that. And if you can communicate that uncertainty, I think that's important as well. And once people understand that, then they'll trust you even more. This guy's honest. He's telling us what the radar can do, what it cannot do. And I think that's
Going
important
forward,
as well.
when we see all of these icons and we see forecasts out to beyond 10 days, is there a risk in that we're not trusting the professionals as much as we should, or that people are not, because they've got all of this stuff out there?
That's a big problem. Weather enthusiasts are now weather enthusiasts are using the social platforms. And I don't think most of them have malicious intent, but they might post a graphic that indicates that it's going to be a tornado outbreak that could kill hundreds of people 6, 7 days in advance. They're using fear to gain followers and clicks and likes and shares. And that's dangerous. That you should never use fear as a motivating factor for people to watch you. And once they get on the air, quite frankly, they're not the best at interpreting radar. Just because you have Radar Scope or Radar Omega or Gibson Ridge software, that doesn't make you a radar meteorologist. Go to a training session that Weather Service forecasters have to go to, a radar school. You'll see how hard it is. Oh, it might be easy when you've got these rare supercell storms with a classic hook and the debris ball. But what about the QLCS tornadoes and a squall line that might be down for 3 or 4 minutes? Do you warn? Do you not warn? What do you tell people? Do you tell people in mobile homes to get out? These are hard, hard decisions. And a 15-year-old weather enthusiast just can't do that. Yet so many people are starting to use them as their main source of weather information.
Well,
But as professionals, we have to be a
yes,
voice of reason.
as we know, and seeing the great advance in meteorology and the utility, weather is now a driver for local news. Do you have to push
It is.
back against the managers and say, hey, this is not a really lead story today? I want to be honest. And is that a difficulty for you going forward, do you think?
For me, no. I'm old and I've been here forever, and they know don't you scare my people with leading in a newscast by stretching the truth. You can't do that. We have to shoot straight. And as professional meteorologists, all of us, we have to be a calm voice of reason leading up to a tornado outbreak, a hurricane, a major winter storm. And during the event, we have to be a calm voice of reason. Yes, be urgent when you need to be. Use harsh language if you need to, bold language, but reserve that for times when it's absolutely critical. You just can't hype up every time that it rains or there's a gust of wind. And we have to be that voice of reason in this sea of insanity right now, disinformation that's across all these social media platforms. And some of these folks, Bob,
young people call you and say, James, will you please talk to my news director and reassure him that I know what I'm doing?
Yeah. For some, and it's really not fair because I've been doing this. I'm like you. I'm old as dirt. I've been doing this a long time, and the news directors know don't mess with me. But for the younger people, they might want them to stretch the truth a little bit and use some hyperbolic language that they shouldn't be using. But we've got to stand up to that, and again, be a calm voice of reason prior to an event and during event. We're starting to lose connection with the people we serve. And I will say, Bob, we can't just be on television. We do have to be on these social platforms. They will drive you crazy. You will deal with trolls and you will deal with vitriol. You will deal with horrible, horrible criticism, especially for women about the way they look, with their bodies. It's horrible what women deal with over there, but we have to live in that world because a lot of people don't use television. They use TikTok, they use Snapchat, they use Instagram, Facebook, Twitter to get their weather information. And we have to be over there because that's where people are.
Have you been successful driving people from those platforms to watch you say, I'm going to be on live now, this is important?
Yeah, during tornado warnings, yes. And of course, we stream our coverage on those platforms. So if they're on Facebook, they can watch it within that platform. They don't have to go to a television. And quite frankly, I would rather them be using a phone so they can take it with them to their tornado safe place. But I do think that once people see you on the social platforms and they get, this guy knows what he's talking about. This guy understands the radar. He understands it. He's calm. His presentation makes sense. They'll find you on television. They will actually find you on television and use your TV products.
James, thanks so much for joining us and for all of the service that you've had over so many years. And actually, I am a good friend of mine who I'll put myself back up here. This woman is Sue Palka, who just retired here in Washington, 37 years. She was a science teacher. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk to her about is I think, having women meteorologists now people are used to, but I think, as you say, 15, 20, 25 years ago, how does a woman, I think women have still challenges for developing trust, don't they? Have you found that?
Yeah, they do. They have unique challenges that we don't have, and it's not fair.
So I'm going to talk to her about that and her back. So it'll be one of those trust elements too within the whole presentation. James, thanks so much. And so you had almost a 4-decade career in Washington, which can be a bit of a tough market, especially when you got this gang behind you. But you had 10 o'clock, and so we were great partners in a way in meteorology, but not competitors. But what secret do you have, or what advice do you have for especially young people, young women entering a market and that want to establish trust as you have? Everybody when you were over the years trusted Sue Palka, that's for sure. So what's
Thanks,
the
Bob.
secret?
Well, let me tell you, I was so intimidated when I started in DC in 1985, and knowing that, you were on the NBC affiliate, and we had Doug Hill and Gordon Barnes over at Channel 9, and Channel 7 had a lot of people coming through at the time. And, that helps me make a point, because I know you're talking about building trust and credibility. And I really think I actually looked up the definition of trust just to be ready for you today. And it is firm belief in the reliability, truth, and ability or strength of someone or something. And so for me, as I thought about what I wanted to discuss today with you, it breaks down to three things. First of all, longevity in the market, which can lead to that credibility. And I was very fortunate to work 36.5 years, but early on, when I was trying to establish trust, I felt like I had to be above and beyond for myself and for the viewers, professional, so that I would be taken seriously. And that also meant doing my due diligence in the community to get to know the viewers and let them get to know me, so that they would say, I'm going to tune in and watch Sue. And, the 10 o'clock, let's be honest, we had it all to ourselves. And there were times when we were getting just phenomenal ratings, like a quarter of all households would be
Especially
watching.
during snowstorms.
Yes, during snowstorms, just
You-
it was
You
absolutely
mentioned when we
epic.
were talking earlier, I know you started as a science teacher, and that you, in preparing for television or preparing for your broadcast, you had a lesson plan.
Yes, in fact, Bob, I tell people all the time, because I didn't go to school for meteorology, and I'm from that era of women that thought we really only had a few paths available to us: education, nursing, business school, secretarial school, things like that. And so I always wanted to teach, and because I did start as a teacher for a few years, I really got that foundation of building a lesson plan, making sure I could deliver on the most important points that I said in my lesson plan I would do. And for forecasters, if people don't know the forecast when we're done, we get an F. And so I really think about, how do I want to present this in a way that my class is going to understand? And if at the end they don't know what I was trying to convey, because my story didn't go in a linear fashion, or I didn't make the points more than once, because attention spans are short. So I tried to always do what I would have done for my students, which is get that main message out more than once. And also, I think as we went on in later years, Bob, I started realizing I'm not the only messenger. And if we want our message at my station to get out, we all have to be on board with the same message. And that meant for me, making sure writers, producers, managers were on the same page as our weather department. And that fell to me to get a daily email out with kind of our bullet points of what we expected, so writers could pull from that to write. And
Everybody's on the same page.
yeah, so everybody's on the same page, and we're not fear casting because somebody saw some young kid in his basement looking at a model 300 days out, 300 hours out, and wants to start hyping a snowstorm. I'm not a fan of fear casting, and I feel like if you use that, you use it at your own peril for short-term gain and long-term pain.
Talk a bit about the social media. When I know in our days there was the internet came along, and now it's exploded.
Oh,
What
wow.
have you learned about, one, the risks of social media, and using it to expand trust also?
Right. And I have strong feelings on that. And it probably has a lot to do with my age, and that I believe, and especially for women, that bar is high. I mean, you can put some somewhat unprofessional photos out there of yourself at the beach on your station branded email, or excuse me, your social media. I really think that's a no-no. Personally, that's what I advise people, is that the station's not going to have your back on that if it goes haywire. So for me, I use my station branded emails for features or for weather content at my social media to make sure I'm advancing the message, and also having fun with pictures so that maybe it'll drive people to the broadcast. I certainly enjoyed very much using other people's pictures as part of my broadcast to make sure they felt connected to the broadcast as well. But I think that for women, that bar is pretty high, and I cringe when I see people on their station branded email. I keep saying email, you know what I mean, station branded social media, putting out pictures that aren't going to necessarily get people to watch you on television.
For young people, and especially young women coming in and all of these options and all of these things out there, what's your best piece of advice to those new generation or mid-career individuals getting into the business of weathercasting, the business of communicating trust?
Right. You know, one of the things I did that I think really worked for me through the years, Bob, and it's so simple, but I watched my broadcast the next day. Not the whole thing, you know, I'd watch like the longer weather, and I critique myself as though I were the consultant. Am I communicating properly? Not talking too fast? Not making gestures or things that are interfering? Is my clothing and hair a distraction? Because the main idea is I want people to know that when you watch me, you're going to understand the forecast and have a very good idea of what's coming next. And, you know, I've been surprised in these later years that weather is still such a big draw for a local newscast. Where we thought the apps would take over for us, I think people still want to hear the weather story. And are you communicating that effectively, not just with your maps, your words, your presentation style, and the perception of what is going to happen the next
It's
day?
still one-on-one. And when people watch Supalka, they trust Supalka. So you're helping them make a decision. And that trust has taken a long time to maintain.
And, you know, and I think there's another piece of the puzzle, Bob, and that is the friendliness, likability factor, and not just for the viewers, but it's amazing what the viewers can pick up on when it comes to chemistry. And I make sure I work on chemistry with my co-anchors and everybody, not just the people that are on air, but the behind the scenes folks who can make you look bad if they want to, or open your mic at the wrong time. My writers, my producers, I make sure I keep a great relationship with them. And I really think being a good newsroom citizen also is a big part of the job these days, because the word gets out if you're a jerk, and the viewers hear about it.
So you were never viewed as anything but a terrific professional, somebody that I know everybody who did the 11 o'clock news watched also Supalka at 10 o'clock before snowstorms to see what Sue was saying. So.
Well, and I'm sure there are a few times I got mad, you know, back in the days when you had to wait for engineering to run the crawls and they didn't run in timely fashion. I could lose my stuff a little bit by saying, guys, we have to get this out. We can't be running these crawls 15 minutes into a tornado warning. Come on, let's go. So those were some of the aggravations early on, but thankfully all those things are automated now and takes that piece of the puzzle off the table for us too.
Well, thanks so much. You were, we all went through that wonderful period of having just television. Now we have everything, but but it's so satisfying also to see the advances in the science of meteorology, and also know that it's the thing people still turn to in local news, because they want to see you, or they want to see, for instance, I'll be talking later on with Harvey Leonard in Boston and Tom Skilling in Chicago. And the trust does take time to develop, though, doesn't it?
It does. Bob, the last thing I would say is I'm so happy that I got to see this day where we went from hearing from viewers who say, oh, I watch you, you get paid to be wrong, to the forecast is so on point anymore that people are really paying attention, and that has also helped to build trust. So kudos to everyone behind the scenes with the algorithms and the models. And now it's up to us to communicate almost the socialization piece that we talk about when communicating about a big storm. And that is, I think, going to be the next hurdle is, can you bring the trust with your communication style and bring it down to earth for people?
Wonderful. Perfect ending. Sue, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyhow, let's start this. And
yeah, sure, Bob.
You have a busier day than I do. Actually.
It's all right. No problem. It's an honor to.
Okay, Tom, this is tying you in with Vern Sumi, who you knew, as I did, and in oops, there it is. There's where you are. This is the latest GOES image. And what sort of influence did Vern and his work in cloud meteorology have on your career?
Oh, my word. You know, Bob, Vern Sumi is one of those incredible scientists who literally changed the face of our profession. I mean, think about it. He had this view of these floating satellite platforms that would look at every weather system from birth to death. And in putting those remote sensing devices up there, we suddenly could see the 70% of the planet that's covered by water, which facilitated the numerical modeling that we all are just marvel at today. Louis Uccellini, who's just retired from the Weather Service, always says that numerical modeling of the atmosphere was one of science's top 10 achievements of the 20th century. And he's absolutely right. I mean, it's revolutionized what we do. But Vern Sumi's work in remotely sensing our oceans and enabling us to provide initial data to our computer models revolutionized. And you know, Bob, when I was going to school at the University of Wisconsin, we'd sit in classrooms, and for the first time in the history of our profession, we were watching landfalling hurricanes and tropical cyclones in real time. And then, of course, to support the work that was being done, Mercatus was developed, which was really a first of its kind data display system that enabled you to lay atmospheric fields on top of satellite imagery and understand the dynamics that were driving the weather that we were watching develop. This was extraordinary. And in a very real sense, Mercatus was kind of the foundation for most of the data analytical systems that we're working with today. So it can't be overstated what Vern Sumi and his team, what their impact was on the field of meteorology. And of course, the University of Wisconsin is the birthplace of satellite meteorology. And you see today in discussions from the National Hurricane Center, the use that's made of the satellite products that continue to come out of the University of Wisconsin and from SIMS there, the Cooperative Institute for Meteorological Satellite Studies. And this is all the product of Vern Sumi. Bob, I've got to tell you, I was a young student at Wisconsin, and I was on the elevator one day, and the door opens up, and who walks in but Vern Sumi? And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I mean, you know, that Vern Sumi. And he looked at me and he said, you're doing television work, aren't you? I was doing weekend weather work in Madison. I said, yes, Dr. Sumi. And he says, you do a nice job. And I thought, wow, coming from Vern Sumi, that was amazing. And years later, I met him at
talk about the evolution of meteorology. You are, you know, when people think, or a meteorologist think, who's someone who's trusted? And this is about trust, this whole program that we're doing, and what is your advice to young people? But what is the key, and what are the things that you tap into, say, for continuing your trust? I mean, using the tools like we have, but what's the key for young people or mid-career people for generating that trust that will help them in their career and also be trusted by the public?
Well, boy, isn't that the $60,000 question, if not worth more than that? You know, Bob, I scared the heck out of the news consultants when I came along because I dared use terms like jet stream and dew point. And they said, you know, nobody can understand that. And I said to them, you know, as a young forecaster who knew they had my career in their hands, I said, well, how are people going to understand it if you don't allow us to talk about it on a weather program? And these are really not terribly difficult to understand foreign concepts. They help us in explaining how the atmosphere is going to evolve. I think, Bob, the best thing that's happened to our credibility in meteorology is the improvement of the modeling that's done, so that when we get on a given night and say, hey, there's a snowstorm coming, it really materializes in much the way that we predicted it to. I can remember the days of my early career before we had operational satellite imagery or modeling available to us. You'd be on the air before millions of people telling them about a storm that you feared was impending the next day. And yet we didn't have these amazing models that we have today to look at to be sure that we were on track and that the storm that we were talking about was on track. I think being honest with your audience.
How do you use the models without saying, oh, here's a model, look at the model? It's a tool, but you have to use it in a way that increases your credibility and your trust, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. You know, Bob, we all know models are marvelous. I often thought the biggest role models played in helping us in our profession was to make us think analytically and conceptualize how the atmosphere may put together tomorrow's weather. And the models helped us in guiding that. But models are imperfect vehicles. You need the human to get in there and modify them. And I find the best way to do that is just look at the recent biases on a combination of models. You know, you and I have talked many times, Bob. I remember we sat at a table years ago about ensembling and the role that the ensembles have played, so that we're not looking at one model, we're looking at groups of model versions of a particular model that help us understand which solutions are outliers and which ones are on target. And I think this is the way to intelligently discuss models is say, folks, now here's a depiction of what's going to occur. But we've noticed, you know, the models underplay the warming in recent weeks, and so we're the forecast we'll present to you at the end of this will increase some over the temperatures you're seeing off this model, or the model's been running dry or wet, and therefore this is a guideline. But here's how we're massaging this to improve the forecast that we're going to give you for tomorrow. And I think a week ago, we were able to identify the first warm spell of the season a week ahead of time because of incredible.
And now it's coming here.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody here had a severe case of cabin fever saying, where's spring? Well, it's here. And its warmth is here as well. Although we were cool in recent days, it's never a smooth journey to the warmth of summer, especially with a cold Lake Michigan sitting right next to us right here. And you have the same problem with the ocean.
I want to go back a bit to the young people and for mid-career people that come and say, oh, look at Tom Skilling. How does he do? People trust him, people watch him. What's your advice to the young person who doesn't necessarily want to take your job, but I want to be just like Tom Skilling?
Well, first of all, it's flattering anybody would aspire to that. And I'm rather humbled by that, Bob, as you know, because I'm sure a lot of folks saying, hey, I'd love to do what Bob Ryan has done for years and years and years and decades and done so effectively. Honesty with your viewers is something. Don't be afraid of talking scientifically about what's going to happen. Just be careful if you use jargon to explain what you mean. Don't try it. We go to doctors and they tell us about our diseases and it's all, shrouded in jargon and so forth. Be honest, explain what you're saying, and tell folks what how you're interpreting the situation. I find people are grateful for that. And it's been a key, that along with the incredible tools that have come online to boosting the credibility of all of us in this line of work.
How about the social media, Tom, and the integration? How do you integrate social media and use it as a tool for continuing and increasing your trust?
Oh, social media, because of the unlimited time that you can take in putting across stories and discussions about the weather, is an incredible tool. Obviously, there's a lot of bad information that clears on social media. And I think we can help those who follow our work by discerning which posts are just way out and which are accurate. But I find it an incredible tool for not only receiving reports from viewers of storms that have come on. I mean, often the first assessment we're able to make of how severe a weather situation has been are the damage reports that we get in the photos that come back from the field. It's an incredible tool that takes us out into the field with our viewers and lets us see what they're seeing. It gives us ground truth on weather situations that are developing. But today I was posting something on the heat that has been baking Texas, and of course that incredible heat wave over in Pakistan and India. Our planet is warming. Climate change is real. It's happening right now. This gives me an opportunity to discuss it in greater detail and to share with folks the amazing scientists who are part of our field and on whose shoulders we all stand, and share some of their work with folks and tell them what's going on. I do things on social media I never do on the air.
Getting with the work and the communication to people, do you think they're getting and believing, yes, climate is changing?
Yes, I do. What I found, Bob, and I've been speaking in many venues with folks from Argonne Labs, from Don Wubbles, Nobel Prize winning scientist who has spent the last 2 years in the Obama White House as a climate advisor. when I go out in the field and we do these presentations with our congressional reps and so forth, it's amazing. You can hear a pin drop. For all the noise that's made by the climate deniers, I find that they make noise far beyond their numbers. And we're not to be frightened by them. They come after you pretty vigorously. But the fact of the matter is the science on this is solid. And if you discuss it honestly with people and you share from these incredible people doing the research in the field, what's going on and their assessment of where we are on our planet, the response is very positive and amazingly so. And it's convinced me that, I've gotten to the point, Bob, that I worried about people posting climate denialism on my posts. I'll try and explain to them why they got it wrong. But I've gotten to the point that if you get a persistent person who's clearly got some political view that they're following and they're not following the science, I take them out. This is not a democracy. It seems to me that we've got to edit the false information that comes across on social media, and if we allow it, can appear on our pages. So, and I've found people are very receptive to this. And of course, as you know, Bob, the polling that's done with the Yale communications folks, it's really and the George Mason University folks, it's clear people are getting it.
Good. How about let's sort of wrap up with the future. What do you see, having reflecting on your wonderful, terrific career there in Chicago, and what will be 20, 30 years from now? Will there be a Tom Skilling automatron that will be delivering the weather? Will we be completely digital, or you think we'll always need that one-to-one communication?
Oh, I'll tell you, Bob, I think the human and our ability to wade through the mountain of data that clears in our profession and communicate it clearly to the public, there will always be a role for the human in this. I don't think we're going away, and I don't think a computer is going to replace us. I think the future, as it has been, as we look back on it, the advancements is very exciting. You know what I'm looking forward to? This phased array Doppler radar that will come online, probably in the 2030s. Is going to be fascinating. I mean, the ability to scan a thunderstorm every 75 seconds and tear it apart and see what's going on inside there is going to lead to information on how these storms operate that we can only begin to imagine. And I think the work on tropical cyclones that's being done to understand the intensification process and improve our forecast is really stunning. I think the future is very exciting, and I look forward to it, Bob. I'm sure you do too.
A lot of folks would agree we need to clone Tom Skilling so he can be in every spot.
Oh gosh, I'll tell you, Bob, spare the viewer that horror, but I'll tell you that. But that's very nice of you, Bob Ryan, to say. It means a lot coming from you.
It's always fun to see you, Tom, and even now we can connect. And thanks so much, and great advice for young people. I mean, don't be afraid of some criticism, and talk to your leadership and talk to your news directors and say, here's what I do, and here's why I think it's going to be successful. And I think you can't can everybody and say here's the formula. It doesn't work.
You are so right, Bob. Right on. Words of wisdom from Bob Ryan.
Hardly.
It is great to see you.
Great to see you. After this is done, I obviously will edit a bit for the pieces. I think what I'm going to do, though, is take out, because everybody, we had an extended chat, and I'll put it all together and then put it online so that young people and that would like to see more than just the 2-minute highlights can actually listen in. And the last one is Harvey Leonard tomorrow, and Harvey, is in his last week now.
Wow!
And
what a storied career!
In Boston for over 40 years. And
gosh,
I'm going to talk today. The fun thing was I was there just before I left for today for a short time. We were both. I was on 5. Harvey was on 7 during the blizzard of '78. So I'm going to say to Harvey that maybe that Jewel Charney watched you on forecasting the weather. And we're going to talk about the models, obviously.
Oh, that's great.
Imagine, thinking or getting a call from Jewel Charney. You did a pretty good job with that barotropic model.
I'll tell you, one of the true pioneers in our field, my gosh, how he and his colleagues have revolutionized meteorology.
Yeah, I have that great picture I'll start with of the ENIAC experiment with von Neumann and Charney. And who did the who headed long range forecasting for many years? He was in there too. And I would call him, then he went to California and San Diego. Jerry Namias.
Oh yeah, Jerome Namias. Yeah, absolutely.
So when I did some winter forecast, I would call Namias and I would put in his outlook for the winter for Washington. So, and he, all those people. That's one thing I think I'll mention. I don't know. I've never met an unhappy meteorologist.
Isn't it the truth? We live in an atmospheric laboratory every day. Bob, I sit here on the shores of Lake Michigan. I watch the changing state of this lake. It is fascinating. You and I have had the real privilege of living through probably arguably the most exciting 50 years in meteorology that has ever existed. I mean, going back to Aristotle's time. More has happened in the last 50 years than probably in all the time back before then. And it's really been an exciting era we've been able to do what we do.
Yeah, and to communicate the science. People believe pretty much everything Tom Skilling says now.
Oh, gosh.
Versus 40 years ago when it's I'll believe it when it happens.
I'll share some of the sometimes some of the denier mail that we all get.
Oh yeah. I think they have a little network, but I talk to people and even the farmers who are sort of this isn't the weather I grew up with. That's what they'll this is not the weather, and
that folks in the agricultural community who have a front row seat to all the changes going on. They can watch their fields flooded and their growing seasons messed up. And yet they're some of the last people to get on board and really associate this with climate change. It always, I marvel at this.
Look out the window. Tom, I'll let you get back to a busy day ahead. Thanks so much. This has been terrific.
It has. And
we were talking about some of the greats of our generation that we knew. And Brian, great to see you. And behind me is now a new book on Joanne Simpson. And you, as I, knew both of the Simpsons and their contribution to tropical meteorology and hurricanes.
Yeah, it can't be overstated. I don't think the foundation of so much of what we do today and what we know today and how we operate today, in terms of how the National Hurricane Center operates, how hurricane hunters work, how storms are investigated, came out of Bob Simpson's processes and procedures and Joanne's research and input to the science and the operations.
Yeah, and it's for young people that hear these names, but within the meteorology, we've been so lucky to know these people, and everyone has just been so welcoming and I think meteorologists are probably the happiest people that I know of any career, certainly compared to lawyers.
Well, I think it's because, everybody admits the shortcomings and shortfalls of making forecasts, right? I mean, you just kind of accept that you're not going to be right sometimes. And that makes a camaraderie, I think, on how you deal with the fact that sometimes you're wrong in important situations and you just have to learn from it and move on. It's a little different than other kinds of disciplines where, in this case, we start with an understanding that sometimes a situation is unforecastable, that you can't come up with an absolutely right answer to what's going to happen.
Well, and going back also for yourself, obviously, there are two names intimately associated, Andrew and Brian. And You were there at the very beginning, and that element of trust has stayed with you. Can you talk to how important one event can be to young people and beginning broadcasters in developing trust?
Yeah, I think that no matter what happens in meteorology, assuming in the future we don't control the weather so that in some sense it's preordained what's going to happen, assuming the atmosphere remains a chaotic system as it is today, it is by definition unforecastable in an absolute sense. We're never going to have perfect weather forecasts, and that by definition means that we're going to have extreme events and that we're going to have outlier events. And so since that you cannot and you never will be able to describe and explain and help people deal with dangerous situations in some sort of a just at a glance set of information, the kind that you'll get on your phone or whatever your portable device is of the future, there will always be a place to be the other source for these difficult situations. And I learned that in Hurricane Andrew. I learned that what people wanted and what people need is to be led through a complex situation so that they can be mentally prepared by the time they have to start getting physically prepared. So, 7 days out from Irma, for example, what could we say? Well, 7 days out, well, we could say there's a threat to Florida. And then we could say there is a continued threat. Then there is an increasing threat. And so people's minds can get going in the direction of what am I going to do about this if it does end up happening. That, in my mind, is the most important lesson of in my time of kind of figuring out how to communicate.
And what you're talking about is a bit of hand-holding through events with the people on the other side.
Exactly, because when these extreme things happen, you have to go into a different mode. You have to think, what's my mode going to be? What's my tone going to be? And I've learned that if you use positive statements and don't say, we don't really know what's going to happen next weekend, and leave a kind of an impression of not knowing, that creates the wrong kind of feeling about the information you're giving them. But if you say there is a threat, the threat is increasing, the threat is decreasing, you keep it positive and you keep it an ongoing, this is what we know, this is when we're going to know more, come back and take people through it. That's what people need in extreme weather situations.
What's your view, given that with the proliferation now of social media and icons and bits and pieces out months in advance, are we informing people and helping them adjust to a different way of communication, or is it just spaghetti all over the place, not only in tracks?
Well, I think that the development of these long-range forecasts, even the fact that you can pick up the phone and find a forecast from a credible weather source 7 or 10 days from now, boiled down to a temperature and an icon, I think all that is damaging to the credibility of weathercasters. So what that means is, though, to maintain credibility and to build it during an extreme situation, you have to have a philosophy, and you have to think, how am I going to help lead people through this? Because those fragments don't do that. So you have to be the counterpoint to the fragments and have a plan, a communications plan, and how you're going to deliver. My number one rule of communications is precision is the enemy of accuracy. So that you gain trust, not through using big words and so forth. You gain credibility through clarity. In my mind, that's the only way.
And for young people and young broadcasters who want to impress that they are meteorologists, it's a bit of a dilemma talking simply and yet not getting into the technical jargon too much.
Yes, you can say anything if you explain it well. So the big effort should be in explaining it. I always tell folks, if you're going to use a fancy word, don't say the word first and then the explanation. Say the explanation first and then the word. If you really want to use that word, if you want to, use an opportunity to educate people. Maybe the word is on social media somewhere. The word was somehow being bandied around. Define it, then say it instead of the other way around, and you will be clearer in your explanation.
So developing trust for early or mid-career broadcasters, what are the one or two main points of how, based on your experience, how they can develop better trust and longevity?
Well, I think that they need to be ready. You have to be ready for the opportunities that you have, which are not generally in the day-to-day weather. They're generally when the situation is extreme. It takes a different philosophy. It takes a different set of ideas for imagining, okay, what are we going to do when there's a blizzard coming or a hurricane coming that has this advanced time? Because it's in that time leading up to the event for those kind of situations, for blizzards and hurricanes, as opposed to tornadoes or severe weather events, which don't have that time window. The severe weather events really need, you need a lot of them to gain trust, like James Spann or the great Oklahoma City folks or other people that had a lot of events to build that trust. But with hurricanes and blizzards, it's that time leading up and having a philosophy for how you're going to explain the uncertainty and lead people through it. That's your opportunity. Have a plan for executing that in a way that fits the situation, which is not the same as just a daily weather forecast.
Last one, looking based on what you've seen and what you've lived, what do you think the presentations will be in the involvement of new forms of communications 10, 20 years out? Will the person, the individual, still be important?
Yes, I think the person will be important because as you get more and more fragmented information, you're still going to need the person for the extreme and outlying events. The question is, how is that person going to work? Because we're still in a situation in the world now where for a big event, the television is the main way that people get their information, in those days that are so critical for preparation or leading up to the event for planning. But as we go forward in time, it's easy to imagine how the screens will get smaller and smaller that the average person will get their information on, as opposed to resorting to the home TV, which a lot of people don't even have access to these days, especially younger people or have no experience with. So how are we going to evolve so that we can communicate as clearly as we can on television, but have it happen on a small device? The small device by definition confines you. Okay, and the graphics are confined, and that's going to be different, I think, and some evolution is going to have to take place to learn how to be clear and complete and comprehensive on these smaller devices.
And then it's an actual human being and not a animatron or who knows what in 20 years talking to you.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be people. I definitely think it'll be people for those extreme events.
Great. Thanks so much. Mike Nelson is in Denver and has been in Denver for 30 years. And
actually, Bob,
I have this, whoop, there it is. I have this map of the predictability of different areas, and Denver is really compared to the East, an unpredictable area. So how do you develop trust living in or predicting in that unpredictability, and also, as we know, great extremes?
I think we develop trust by being consistent when there is a big change in the weather. Make sure that you're on the air. So I'll work weekends, nights. If a blizzard is coming, it's my Super Bowl. I've got to be there. So I've never missed a major storm. And that way, I think the audience recognizes that when a major change is coming, you're going to be on the air to talk about it with them. Colorado has weather that's life-threatening every single month of the year, whether it's avalanches in the wintertime, winter storms, blizzards. We get a lot of lightning, a lot of large hail, and Weld County, which is up where Greeley is, has more tornadoes than any other county in the United States. Now, they tend to be smaller, a lot of land spouts, but That actually is a distinction that you'd think would be in Oklahoma or Texas, but it's in Colorado. So what I found over the years is be honest with your audience. Explain to them when it's a difficult forecast situation, when things may change dramatically. And if you mess up, fess. Explain what happened, why the forecast went wrong. And I think that builds trust. If you try and make it sound like, well, I really didn't miss the forecast that much, that's not going to do very well. One of the things that I don't like, that I see a trend in right now, is forecasters showing the audience all the models. Here's the European, here's the NAM. To me, that's a bit like your doctor saying, well, here's your X-ray and your MRI and your CT scan. What do you want to do? We're the experts. We should be interpreting the data and then giving our audience our best estimate of what's going to happen.
Well, with the great variability that you have there in trying to communicate that, what's your feeling about the future and all the social media and icons that seem to be every place? Does that help or hinder?
It hinders more than helps. I always joke with people when they say, well, what do you think it's going to do for our golf game on Saturday? I go, well, my app says, and then I'll laugh. There's so much information out there and so much of it that's of limited quality that I think it is really diluted our expertise. And I hope that as a trusted source of information, that when things are really changing quickly, or if there's a major storm coming in, that people will know that there's a difference between some free app you have on your phone and somebody that's been forecasting for 45 years.
What's the one thing that you've learned, what I've learned there about increasing trust and people that will turn to you, especially during dangerous weather?
I think it's being a good storyteller, a good explainer of what's going on. If you can, what did Einstein say? If you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you probably don't understand it very well yourself. And so our job is to not just put a bunch of numbers up on the map, but explain to people what's going on. What is this storm doing as it's approaching? Why is one situation more complicated and harder to predict than another one? If you can convey that, I think you're building trust, because the audience realizes, I got to pay attention on this one, because this is obviously a very fast-moving, fast-changing situation, and one that could be a big impact situation.
Mike, thanks so much, and increase your trust as you continue your tenure in Denver. With a longtime friend and colleague, Veronica Johnson, who has early in the mornings, I think she's almost at nap time now, but is doing
Yes.
very early mornings, has done the very late and very nighttime, and then also locally and nationally. And Veronica, how do you communicate trust? Is it different for early in the morning versus an evening, locally and nationally? Communicating trust.
I would say there are no big differences, Bob. Having worked every shift, I look at what I do as a relationship, like any relationship that I would have with a family member, with my husband, right? It starts with when you communicate, being calm in delivery, right? From when it comes to storms, from the beginning to the middle to the end, being calm and communicating very well, along with being there when someone needs you, which is what you're going to do in a relationship. You've got to be there when you're needed. And in this case, it means being there, not necessarily for, each and every day if you're someone who's on vacation, but if there is a big storm that is about ready to hit the area, people who have come to watch you day in and day out, they are still going to look for you for information. And these days we have so many more platforms to be able to get that information from, say, myself, and that is social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. So if I'm out of town, I can still be posting, because as you know, we can still get all our information and many of the tools that we need to be able to come up with a good forecast.
Do you feel that those social media and all of the stuff out there helps you communicate trust, or is it more of a challenge? Will people trust you if they just see an icon?
They're not going to trust me if they just see an icon, right? If they go to our Stormwatch 7 weather app and they look at those icons, the idea is that hopefully they know that they can get more information on a personal level, this relationship that I have built over time with them. And I can deliver that with video to them that is also more personable.
How long have you found, and in your experience, how long does it take for you, or would it be for a new person coming in, to develop trust with the viewer and with the audience?
I would a very long time. Listen, this doesn't happen overnight. This doesn't happen in a year. Sometimes when a meteorologist is new to an area, in fact, maybe they're seasoned, they're new to an area, it can still take as much as 5 and 6 years to start to develop trust with your audience. And of course, that comes too with not just winning on the days when you nail that forecast, but owning a forecast when maybe things didn't work out so well. Explaining to the audience why it didn't, not laboring on it, but just explaining some of the variables. And
well, that helps build trust, is
yes,
admitting, hey, I was wrong and here's why I was wrong.
So important. Again, it's like a relationship that you would have with anyone else.
Let me, another thing that you've had to deal with is being a woman in what started out as only a guy kind of thing, communicating and being in the public eye. What have been the special challenges you felt about developing trust specifically?
As a female, I would say, especially early on, it was that sometimes I would get emails, back then when people would email you instead of just tweeting at you, emails that maybe my forecast wasn't as good as someone else. And I would say for anyone starting out, whether you're female or not, don't let that voice deter you from what you're already doing, which is, I'm sure, being diligent, having good habits when you come in. And Bob, I learned from the very best, and that starts with being passionate as soon as you walk in the door to forecast, making sure that you are getting your information with as much detail and scope as possible to deliver a forecast. And that doesn't mean to deliver that forecast in a technical way, but in a conversational way, which actually builds more trust. If you can be conversational with all that stuff that you know and the forecast that you put together.
Look out with the artificial intelligence, all of the different things, 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. Will things be dramatically different, do you think, in communicating trust?
I don't think so. I think that in many ways, that eventually the more tools that we have will help us. We know that, we've come a long way with forecasting and being able to put together a better forecast, but it's up to us as meteorologists, broadcasters on air or social media to, again, always be clear in our delivery with the knowns, the unknowns. I look at virtual reality and AI as nothing more than an accessory to what I'm wearing. In this case, it's an accessory, AI, virtual reality, that glitzy little blazer that maybe I'm going to wear. The AI is that glitzy thing to get your attention for the impact of flooding, coastal flooding, tidal flooding, river flooding, rain flooding. It's going to get your attention with what that impact is going to be.
Thanks so much. I think anything else that you wanted to mention? Again, I'm going to have to edit a bit.
Of course.
And I will do that probably at the beginning of June, and I'll send it back to you just to okay. But obviously, the couple of different hats in addition to being a female is that
yes, I think that probably the
overarching
overarching thing.
The main points with the trust, the communication. And
right. And yeah, the one point I did want to make, and that is that.
Okay, wait, let me keep going. Let me just set you up.
Okay.
Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, the one big point I want to make is, listen, folks can flip around, watch a lot of different broadcast meteorologists, but we are people in the end. We're all people. And whether you think you do or not, we have implicit bias, and that implicit bias is going to have a lean or sway, a feel to you or someone else. And that might be a negative and lower your satisfaction rating with that person as to how accurate and how much they trust you.
Terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I will send it now. Here we are at 3 o'clock and in the afternoon.
I love your background.
Yeah, and I thought that would fit. Each one is a bit different, so I tried to.
Oh, you had different backgrounds for
Oh
everyone?
yeah. No,
Oh,
I had Dave Atlas with James Spann, and let's see, and then Sue Palka is. I'm going to do Sue. I think early next week, and Matthew. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with Matthew. It'll be maybe a teenage.
yeah, but that is so important. Like I said in the beginning, I like that this is varied with people and a little bit with ages. But Bob, I've told you so many times, the one thing that I really am glad that I got from you and early in my career, having worked first at the Weather Channel, was that it starts with passion, right? That passion is what drives us every day, and what will keep us in this business through the years. And
I know one thing I didn't ask, and I've looked at trying to find out graphics of confidence, and they almost are non-existent. You, when you say, I'm very confident or likely, the words likely, what the heck? Remember remember that graph of how people interpret the words of uncertainty. Do you make an effort to communicate confidence in a very specific way or a numerical way to your audience?
I do not, because that is confusing. And funny that you should say that, because our station, starting with the morning show, we're going through this revamp of the graphics that we show to communicate, and it's got to be clear, it's got to be simple. Same thing with what we say. Forget the science jargon. That's for online, right? No big graphs, like, love the Weather Service, and thank you for always providing that information for me to forecast, of course, but that's not what we need to be using on the air to communicate uncertainty.
How do you know?
Confidence.
Who tells you whether that the graphics that you use are excellent or good communication? How do you know?
Well, it has to be clear, first of all. And I think that it's more about the words that we use, because I bet there's somewhere out there that people are still doing more listening than they are looking at the graphic,
especially in the
morning, because
on television.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we as people, we really can only take in one thing at a time well. And at the top of the list is listening. What are you saying, right? And we as meteorologists, I think what the young people can learn from those that are more seasoned, and what I've learned from you, is that words are very important and very weighted. And we are not just looking at reading this Weather Service forecast, a 70% chance of rain today, and it drops to this. What does that mean, right? And that's where we're conveying to our audience. We're getting better with more detailed forecasts for areas. As a sidebar, next gen TV and how you're going to get your weather delivered is going to be the next big thing.
Great. Veronica, thank you so much. Big hug.
You're welcome.
You as being 100% enthusiastic and into everything, but you're trying to communicate which is the ways that you think you're best, you can best communicate with your audience. Is it through social media or live broadcast or streaming? There are all sorts of things now.
Yeah, I think it's all about giving people what they want, when they want it, and how they want it. And so I think they all are kind of different sides of the same coin, and they complement each other. For example, I'll kind of mine social media to put feelers out and see what folks are interested in that day beyond just the regular forecast. If there's something in the sky that's generating buzz, or if there's something, for example, a couple of weeks ago, people were hearing sounds all over DC from a concert at RFK Stadium. They wanted to know why they could hear that at their place miles away. And we went and explained why it was an inversion.
You're watching what people say. You're getting that as feedback continuously, almost, right?
Exactly. And one of the benefits to my job is that I have a very weird career. I work for the Washington Post. I work for Fox 5. I work for an app in Florida. I work for local radio. I teach kids. I mean, I try to do a bit of everything. And so I'm getting constant feedback from just about every demographic in every way information is consumed. And that helps me figure out what folks want to hear and how they want to hear it.
What's the most surprising thing that that you didn't expect getting the feedback from social media?
I've been really surprised by the number of people my age who I can lure to a TV channel, or who I can lure to sit and watch a 2 or 3 minute video. People my age have next to no attention span. And yet I'm really shocked by, if you give them what they want, they will sit there for it. They'll give you 3 minutes of their time. People my age don't have time for anything. And yet, if you enter into a conversation with them, and if they see themselves represented on TV, part of the reason people my age don't watch TV is because no one my age is on TV in local news.
You are now.
I mean, we make a concerted effort to represent every other demographic group so people can feel like they're being seen on air.
But
And
with this stuff now, is this a help or a hindrance in communicating, effectively communicating the forecast?
It makes our job tougher because we have to be better than the apps, but we have to prove we're better than the apps. And I don't think most people care to sit and figure out who's better. I think a lot of folks are content with good. If you can have an ice cream cone that's a good ice cream cone and it's a little bit cheaper, a little bit easier to get than the world's best ice cream cone, most folks are going to say, yeah, I'll just take the good ice cream cone. Same thing here. Most people are just going to take good, and apps are pretty good. A lot of them are lousy in some areas, but overall, they're decent for what people need.
Do you, in doing either the live streaming or in your broadcast, use it as an opportunity, though, to try and say, look, this is what the app is showing today, and it's much more complicated than that?
I do. I see it as an opportunity to explain why the app is oversimplifying something and how they got to their conclusion. There are times when people text me their app output. I'm like, I have no idea. It's like almost being asked to show someone else's math when they got the wrong answer. And so I do my best to explain why my answer is right and why theirs might be faulted. But it's tricky. I'm torn between, like, even for example, at work, we have our own weather app that we promote. Like, do I want to promote our app because our app is kind of slowly replacing us? Or do I want to lure people? It's a very weird dichotomy, and I wish I had the right answer, but I struggle with it too. I work for an app in Florida, and it's a decent app. There are definitely things I change about it, and I've been a little bit too vocal about what I think needs work on. But yet
that's an issue with the management. Obviously, weather is the driver for local news now. We can get news and sports and everything. So they're continuously trying to drive weather. And is that something you have to struggle with or push back a little bit on?
I have to say, and I have no basis of comparison because I am weird. This is like a dream TV job for anybody, and I just kind of walked into it. My management, I have to say, is second to none. I've never heard of, like, even my contract, they let me go and chase tornadoes for 40 days and then waltz back and do the news every day. But they don't micromanage at all, I think, every day. And so if I want to go on air and explain what baroclinicity is, but talk about what it means, why it affects forecast, or go on air and explain bombogenesis, or show 250 millibar vorticity, they let me do it. And I think they get that it's atypical, but it works because people want more or they want different. And it's about knowing demographic too. DC is a very smart academic city.
What one piece of advice to young people or beginning mid-career or beginning career have you learned about trust? We're sort of talking, if people trust you, they think you're correct. What have you learned about communicating trust?
So there are two pieces to that answer. The first thing is it's tough for people to trust a 23 or 24-year-old who looks like he eats off the kids menu still. It's really tough. And so I have to go in there and I have to prove that I'm, or at least give the illusion of being more knowledgeable than everybody else there, just to be treated as an equal in the eyes of the viewer. And so I go in there, I start teaching right away. My first forecast, I talked about baroclinicity and all these random things to assert that I know my stuff and the viewer should come and listen to me talk. The other thing too is that I try to own anytime I'm wrong, because really this is a science. We're making hypotheses. Our forecasts are predictions and nothing more than that. We get it wrong a lot. We get it right a lot more often, but we get it wrong a lot. And when I get it really wrong, I go back and I explain, here's what went wrong. Here's what we learned. Here's what we as a group can take away from this, because really, I'm not a TV meteorologist. I mean, I'm a meteorologist and I happen to be on TV, but above all, I'm a teacher. I'm a science teacher who teaches weather, and I happen to be on TV. I happen to be in print. I happen to be on radio. I happen to be on an app, but really it's about teaching.
And one thing that, where is it? There it is the, I did find a graphic that at least, this is a meteorologist in the Finger Lakes of New York State, but it shows the confidence in the forecast. Now, years ago, decades ago, I would try and communicate confidence. How confident, is that something that you think more and more people should be doing, communicating how confident you are?
Absolutely, and I try to do that in my forecast as often as I can. People can't walk away from the forecast thinking it's a binary, this will happen or this won't happen. They need to understand why a lot of weather and science in general is in a gray area. We've seen this as an issue with the pandemic. People communicate things as law, and then the science shifts and people just kind of left in the dust because they don't realize things can change. Here's why they might change. A couple of months ago, there was a stationary front forecast set up right near DC. We're forecasting Reagan National Airport. Some of the models had 55, others had like 80. So I made my forecast that day 62 to 78. And my peers, the anchors were like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, that's the best I can do. Here's why that's the best I can do today. And you know,
people remember that. People remember that too. Go put on the thinking hat 20, 30, 40 years from now. What do you think a weather forecast might look like? Is it going to be sort of the same in all these icons, or AI or virtual? Will they put on a virtual headset to watch you, or will you be on?
I think it'll be all these things. I think that, I mean, well, we already see it with the Max 3D, I forget what it's called, but like the Max virtual reality. I think we're going to be spreading ourselves too thin, because we need to be everywhere. We need to be on YouTube. We need to be live streaming at the same time that we're on air, at the same time we're in print, at the same time we're everywhere. As it is, I'm doing 4 or 5 different jobs, and I'd like to be out there more on more platforms. So I don't think necessarily the style of the forecast will change, but I think that the medium over which we are broadcasting it is going to just multiply and multiply and keep proliferating until we're trying to be everywhere at once. And my concern with that, every medium has a slightly different style. I'm slightly different on Twitter than I am on YouTube, than Facebook, than on air, than on Instagram or whatever. I think it's going to be tricky to either do snippets for everybody or do something continuously, but this weird morphed style that might not work for anything. So I don't know. I think it needs to be much more conversational, though. I think that people these days, they're not loyal to brands, they're loyal to people. They want a conversation. Nobody wants more bad news. They want to talk weather and have a conversation.
And I think it's weather as, and I've used the analogy as medicine, person to person. You go in and your doctor says, here are the results of the test. And you say, well, what should I do? So you're not going to say, oh, look here's the model. That's one of my favorite things. The models say.
Oh, that incenses me. I genuinely cannot stand when people do that, because there are times I'll show the model and I'll say, we're going to take a look at 3 things that are wrong this morning. Here's why I think they're wrong. Because people need to understand our value too. If we're getting up there, we're showing the model plot, we're showing auto plot, they can see right through that. Viewers are a lot smarter than we think they are, and a lot smarter than any consultant out there tells us they are. They might not always understand the difference between satellite and radar and infrared and whatever, but they can tell who's showing up and standing in front of the graphics and who's actually doing some science.
Great. I'm going to use that. That's a great bite at the end. Thanks again. And